NASA tells you the success stories. The perfect launches, the smiling astronauts, the missions that went according to plan. But what they don't tell you are the missions that almost killed everyone on board. The missions so close to disaster that even NASA hid the details for decades. Missions that were seconds away from ending the entire space program. Today, you're going to see the side of NASA they never wanted you to know. These are the real, documented, near-fatal missions. Covered up, downplayed, or quietly buried. And trust me, once you hear what happened behind closed doors, you'll never look at space travel the same way again. Everyone remembers Apollo 11. Nobody talks about Apollo 12, because this mission almost ended before it even started. Seconds after liftoff, the Saturn V rocket was climbing through stormy clouds. Then it happened. A lightning bolt hit the rocket. Then a second one. Inside the cockpit, everything went black. Alarms screamed. Navigation gone. Fuel readings gone. Electrical systems fried. Mission control had no idea what was happening. The astronauts, they were flying blind at 7,000 kilometers per hour. NASA later admitted, if one more system had failed, the rocket would have fallen back to Earth and exploded. But the public never heard the full severity, because NASA couldn't afford another PR disaster months after Apollo 11. The official line? A minor electrical disturbance. Reality. Apollo 12 was inches away from killing its entire crew on live TV. Apollo 13. The problem they don't mention. The world knows the quote. Houston, we've had a problem, but NASA always frames it as a heroic rescue story. Here's what they leave out. The explosion that crippled Apollo 13 wasn't bad luck. It was NASA negligence. Before launch, engineers warned the oxygen tank was damaged. NASA ignored them. During testing, the tank overheated. NASA ignored it. When the explosion happened, the crew was 90 seconds away from complete loss of oxygen. Had that happened, they wouldn't have died heroes. They would have suffocated silently in deep space. NASA scrubbed internal reports. They blamed technical issues. They never admitted how close they came to killing 3 astronauts over careless engineering. Apollo 13 wasn't a miracle. It was a cover-up of the biggest screw-up in NASA history. Part 3. Skylab's. Hidden Disaster Skylab. America's first space station was supposed to be a triumph. Instead, it nearly turned into an orbiting tomb. During launch, 2 critical systems failed. The heat shield ripped off the main solar panel, tore away inside the station. Temperatures went above 65 degrees Celsius. Food melted. Film melted. Electronics warped. NASA publicly said. Small issues with thermal control. Reality. Astronauts refused to enter the station because it was a literal oven in space. NASA's solution. A desperate emergency repair mission. The astronauts performed one of the most dangerous spacewalks in history, manually installing a massive umbrella-like shield while floating next to 25,000 miles per hour debris. One slip, and they were dead. NASA later admitted privately, if those repairs failed, Skylab would have become uninhabitable. But to the public, a successful mission. Sure, a successful mission that almost roasted astronauts alive. Part 4. The Challenger warnings, they buried January 28, 1986. The Challenger shuttle exploded 73 seconds after launch. NASA called it unexpected. That was a lie. Engineers warned NASA for 9 years that the O-rings, the rubber seals on the booster, were dangerous in cold weather. NASA ignored them. Management overruled safety. Why? Launch schedule. The night before the disaster, engineers begged NASA to delay. They said the O-rings would fail at the morning temperature. NASA managers told them to stop being alarmists. 73 seconds into flight, the O-rings failed. A fireball killed the entire crew. NASA buried the warnings. They blamed technical issues. The truth only came out because a whistleblower exposed internal documents. Challenger wasn't an accident. It was the result of NASA burying evidence. NASA loves talking about lunar missions, but they never mentioned the event that almost killed astronauts without anyone knowing. During Apollo 16, a massive solar radiation storm erupted. This wasn't a flare. It was the kind of storm that destroys satellites and fries electronics. Had the astronauts been on the moon's surface at that exact time, their suits had zero protection. They would have been dead in minutes, not from heat, not from impact, but from radiation burning their organs internally. NASA kept this quiet. Why? Because the Apollo program was already under political pressure. Years later, scientists admitted, a single solar storm at the wrong time would have killed every Apollo crew. So much for safe missions. In 2018, alarms went off on the ISS. Pressure was dropping fast. NASA claimed it was a tiny hole. Just a drill mark. No big deal. Here's the truth. The hole was getting worse. The sealant wasn't holding. The crew was one failure away from depressurization. And NASA had no backup plan at one point. Astronauts were literally holding a flashlight and tape, trying to find where air was escaping as the station orbited Earth at 28,000 kilometers per hour. NASA publicly said, routine repair. Privately, engineers admitted, if the leak widened, we wouldn't have been able to save the crew. Again, information buried. As the mission continued, Gemini 8 suddenly became a death trap. A single thruster melted and the spacecraft snapped into a violent spin, not slow rotation, full revolutions per second. The stars outside turned into streaks. Inside, Armstrong and Scott were being slammed by G-forces. Vision blurring, blood rushing into their skulls. Consciousness slipping. This wasn't training. This wasn't a simulation. Tease was real and happening fast. If the spin continued for even a few more seconds, the structure of the spacecraft would be torn apart, ripping both astronauts into space. With no time, no instructions, and no support, Armstrong did something no manual had taught him. He shut down the entire attitude system and switched to emergency controls, a last chance move nobody expected to work. But it did. The spin stopped. The mission stabilized, and 2 lives were saved by a decision made in seconds. NASA never told the public how close they came to losing Armstrong. The man who would later walk on the moon because admitting it would have crushed confidence in the entire space program. So they buried the real numbers, the real data, the real danger. For decades. And that brings us to the truth. Space exploration isn't a clean, heroic highlight reel. It's chaos. It's risk. It's near disasters hidden behind professional PR statements. NASA survived not because the machines were perfect, but because the astronauts were better than the systems meant to protect them. And if this is what NASA finally admitted years later, imagine what's still locked away in classified mission logs. Maybe the real story of NASA isn't what they achieved, but what they almost lost.